My father said, "You're not going to college." In that moment, he handed my future over to my younger brother. 6 months later, they were pleading for me to return. I had dedicated my entire life to this goal, my college fund, my dreams. But when I finally held that acceptance letter in my hands, my dad's words echoed in my mind, "You're not going." He had given my future away to my brother. What could I do? I left. Yet, half a year later, they were begging me to come back. This is my story of survival. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation like you see in movies on the day I learned the news. No, the fact that it was so quiet, so chill, and almost casual made it worse. I can still remember the scent of my dad's coffee burning on the warmer as I stood in our living room, the air thick with the summer heat. I was clutching the acceptance letter from my dream college, grinning like a fool. This was the culmination of 4 years spent avoiding trouble, working weekends to stay busy, and pushing through school. My mom's eyes were glued to her crossword puzzle, while my dad didn't even bother to get up from his chair. After taking a sip of his coffee, he simply said, "Yeah, about that. You're not going." At first, I laughed, thinking he was joking, perhaps a terrible joke. There was a college fund. He and my mom had always promised me that they would support my education. They had made that vow every birthday, every report card ceremony, and during awkward family dinners since I turned 12. "You work hard, son, and we'll make sure you get to college." I had put in the effort. While others sought out easy paths, I stayed out of trouble, convinced that my hard work would pay off. I turned down parties and skipped vacations, only to be met with a shrug as I stood there, letter trembling in my hands. Dad's response was chilling, "It's all gone." We gave it to Ryan. Ryan, my younger brother. Ryan, who had never passed a class without cheating. Ryan, who had wrecked 2 cars by the time he turned 17. Ryan, who could charm anyone long enough to escape real consequences. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Instead of breaking my heart, Dad leaned back in his chair, as if he had just finished a long day at work. His words stung, "He deserves it more. He's got potential. He just needs a little help to get serious. You'll figure something out." After everything, I wish I could say I screamed, fought, and demanded to know how they could do this to me, but I didn't. I stood there, feeling my heart slowly shatter as I realized that all those years of sacrifice had been meaningless to them. Without uttering another word, I trudged upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I found my old duffel bag, the one I had used for middle school soccer tournaments, and stuffed it with my battered laptop, a few changes of clothes, and the small amount of money I had saved from my after-school jobs. No one tried to stop me. My mother didn't look up, and my father remained seated. Ryan must have been out somewhere, enjoying the life that was supposed to be mine. As I stepped out onto the porch, the cicadas buzzed loudly in the humid air. I had no idea where I was headed, but one thing was certain, I would never return. That first night, I slept in my car. There was no plan, no strategy, just a numb version of myself driving in circles until the gaslight on my old Civic flickered on. I felt smaller than ever when I pulled into a Walmart parking lot, reclined the seat back, and stared at the cracked roof fabric. I kept hoping that maybe Dad would text me, or Mom would call, but my phone remained dark. Not a single message, no missed calls. The days that followed were a long stretch of job boards, canned soup, and sleeping with one hand on the door lock. I managed to scrape together gas money by pawning my old Xbox. I earned cash under the table by cleaning dusty warehouses and hauling furniture for moving companies, taking on day labor wherever I could. It felt like everyone could sense my desperation. Yet, a small flame within me refused to be extinguished. I couldn't shake Dad's words that Ryan deserved it more, and instead of giving up, it ignited something in me, a silent rage, not the kind that leads to wall punching, but the kind that drives you to create something with your own hands as proof of your existence. I stumbled upon a flyer stuck to the window of a rundown coffee shop, space for rent, cheap, no questions asked. It was a shoebox hidden behind a dilapidated strip mall, hardly larger than a storage locker. But it from the dollar store, but gradually, hope began to stave off the gloom, and I kept quiet about it. No calls home, no social media posts, and no reaching out to anyone who might have questions I wasn't ready to answer. I wanted to protect this fragile spark of ambition from being extinguished before it had a chance to grow. I intended to nurture this monster in the dark. Meanwhile, Ryan was making headlines a few states away, but not for anything good. It started with whispers. I received a message from a neighbor back in my old town that read, "Hey, your brother got into some trouble at school." The headline of a local news article that appeared on my cracked screen read, "College freshman suspended after fraternity vandalism incident." My heart raced as I clicked on the link. There he was, Ryan, smiling foolishly in front of a wrecked student lounge, a spray paint can still dangling from his hand. The boy who was supposedly more deserving. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply shut down the article, turned off my phone, and returned to my work. At that moment, I realized they had placed all their bets on the wrong son, and soon they would find out. 6 months to the day after I left, it happened. At first, I was completely unaware. With my headphones on and the smell of varnish filling the air, I was sanding down an antique coffee table. As usual, my phone was buried in my backpack, forgotten for hours. But when I finally took it out to check the time, I saw a slew of missed calls: 1, 2, 8, and finally one, all from Mom, Dad, and even Ryan, the same people who had watched me walk out without a word. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Part of me wanted to throw the phone into a storm drain, block their numbers completely, and pretend they didn't exist. But curiosity won out. I opened the most recent voicemail. Mom's voice was small and shaky. "Sweetheart, we need to talk. Please, things are bad. Just call us back, okay? We miss you. We miss you." It felt like she was speaking a different language, the words unfamiliar and heavy. I listened to the next message while lying on the concrete floor of my little shop, which I had built piece by piece with my own hands. Dad's voice was rough and clumsy. "Listen, son, it's time we, put the past behind us. Your brother's had a rough patch. The family needs you. The family needs you." If it weren't so pitiful, it would have been almost funny. As I continued to scroll, I found Ryan's message, the most desperate of all. "Bro, I screwed up. Okay, I know you're mad, but can you just come home for a little while? Please? Mom's freaking out. Dad's losing it. We need you, man." The boy who was supposed to be more deserving, the golden child, was now pleading for my help. I didn't return the call. I didn't send a text. Instead, I polished every piece of furniture I had prepared for the market that weekend, humming along to the soothing music in my earbuds. I stayed up until midnight, finding more comfort in the steady scratch of sandpaper against wood than I ever had at home. The next morning, out of habit, I checked Instagram. There it was again, Ryan's face, but this time without a smile, on the local news page for my hometown. Former student expelled after financial scandal. Police investigating. What I instinctively knew was confirmed by the article: Ryan had spiraled after being suspended. Bad decisions piled up one after another. Fake GoFundMe pages had been created and made public, and student loans were squandered on parties. He thought his friends would cover for him, but they turned him in instead. The last illusions my parents held onto had vanished along with the Golden Boy's empire. They now needed a new savior, and somehow, they believed it could still be me after everything, after they had taken my future and handed it to someone who set it ablaze. The irony was that I no longer felt angry at all. I felt free. They were trying to reach a person who no longer existed, the silent backup plan, the safety net, the faithful son who had vanished 6 months ago after packing an old duffel bag. That person would never return. I took my time responding. In fact, I didn't respond at all, not at first. The calls kept coming in the days that followed. Mom changed her approach, sending lengthy texts filled with old photos from Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, and trips where we all wore matching t-shirts, as if nostalgia could undo what had been done. Dad was less subtle, leaving a string of angry voicemails. "After everything we sacrificed for you," your brother wrote across it with each message, hoping I would be desperate enough to reach out. But I no longer felt desperate. I was doing well. My small furniture business had grown, it wasn't so small anymore. I had recurring clients, and every week, new orders came in thanks to a feature in the local newspaper. People genuinely admired what I created, not for what I could do for them, but for the craftsmanship itself. Just me, no safety net, no handouts, no college fund. The thought of returning to that place, sitting at the same shabby kitchen table where Dad had once assured me I wouldn't be leaving, made my stomach churn. I wasn't upset, I wasn't resentful. I was finished. One evening, I finally took a call, but it was only to shut the door, not to argue or explain. Mom's voice was filled with optimism. "Honey, oh thank God. We've been so worried. We just want to talk, that's all. Maybe you can come by this weekend?" I waited for her to finish, then spoke in a quiet, low voice. "No." The line crackled into a piercing silence. "What do you mean, no?" she asked, her confusion palpable. "I'm not coming back. Not for a visit, not for a talk, not for anything. Sweetheart, please. We're family." I grinned, but not in a kind way. "No, you were a family when it was convenient. Now you're just people I used to know." I didn't flinch when I heard her choke on a sob. "You made your choice when you gave my future away like spare change," I replied. "And now I'm making mine." I hung up the phone before she could respond, before the tears, apologies, and promises could start pouring out. After a moment of staring at the screen, I switched the phone off. It felt like severing the last thread of a life that had been trailing behind me like a broken kite. It felt lighter in my hand. I stepped out onto the porch of my small rented shop, which had become my home. The sky was streaked with scarlet and gold as the sun sank lower. The quiet buzz of traffic and the scent of freshly cut lumber filled the warm air. It was a scent of liberation. I stood there for a long time, absorbing everything. The boy who had yearned for their approval for years wasn't me anymore. I wasn't there to protect them from their poor choices. Standing on the firm foundation I had created for myself, I realized I no longer needed to flee from the past. As I turned to go back inside to the life I had built without them, I recognized that I had made it through that. The best form of retaliation was survival, beautiful, quiet, and steadfast survival. You expect it to feel like a war when you walk away. You prepare for remorse, guilt, and second thoughts to gnaw at you through the night. However, none of that materialized. I only sensed silence, the good kind, not the acrid, harsh sort. It was like standing in a field after a storm and breathing clean air for the first time. For a long time, I believed that love required giving up something to make room for others. Giving until all that was left was the hope that they would notice. But true love doesn't urge you to vanish. Your dreams aren't meant to be handed over to someone else and referred to as family. I had no obligation to explain myself to them. I had no obligation to give them another chance. Being free was something I owed to myself, and I made that precise decision. Listen carefully, you are not selfish for choosing yourself. If you're reading this and find yourself in my shoes, standing at that fork in the road, debating whether to remain loyal to those who wouldn't blink if you vanished, know this: when you leave someone who only remembers your value in times of need, you are not being harsh. You are not broken. Even if they never said it, you are enough, especially if they didn't say it. Sometimes, letting go of someone who made you question whether you ever earned love is the best act of self-love you can perform. I didn't seek updates, but even when you don't ask for them, life has a strange way of delivering them to you. A few months after that last contact, I learned from an old neighbor that things at home had quickly fallen apart. Ryan's debts didn't magically disappear after he left school. Dad had drained the college fund for him, and it was long gone. What about the humiliation none of them had anticipated? How long would it linger? Dad's truck had to be sold, and Mom picked up a second job at the grocery store on the outskirts of town. Ryan continued to believe the world owed him something, despite his repeated poor choices. They tried to maintain the facade, but comfortably pay the bills, but nothing spectacular or worthy of a headline. It was enough to start saving, enough to look forward to a future that finally felt like mine. I began to attract regular customers who appreciated not just the furniture, but the person behind it. One afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Harris came in to pick up a personalized table. After shaking my hand and smiling, they remarked, "You should be proud." You're building something real that matters. Their words struck me more deeply than I had anticipated. For the first time, I was seen as someone who mattered because of what I had chosen to become, not as a last resort or a backup plan. I no longer felt the need to prove anything, not to myself, not to strangers, nor to my family. I was enough just as I was. Everything they had tried to control, their love, their money, their approval, no longer owned me. Not even the college fund or the hollow promises. For a while, they had led me to believe it did, but freedom doesn't feel like fireworks, which is amusing. It doesn't come with a big-budget movie scene where you scream into the heavens and throw your arms in the air. It's softer and quieter than that. Once it becomes ingrained in your bones, you'll never let it go again. Freedom feels like a leisurely Sunday morning, sitting in a workshop that smells of sawdust and promise, sipping terrible coffee from a chipped cup. It's the realization that you don't have to answer the phone just because someone asks you to. It's going into a store and buying a modest item for yourself that you want rather than need, without second-guessing yourself or feeling guilty about it. It's laughing without looking over your shoulder to see if someone is about to interrupt. I began to make friends who were unaware of my past, people who didn't wear outdated assumptions around their necks like chains. I had another dream. I was breathing in front of you in a way that felt solid and possible, rather than the desperate way I used to, clutching to someday like a life raft. I aspired to purchase my own building, grow the store, and teach other kids, the ones everyone had given up on, how to believe in themselves and create something with their hands. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I no longer needed their presence. In reality, those who loved you only when you were useful to them were never truly your family in the first place. Family is more than just kinship, it's those who stand quietly in your corner, holding space for your goals, cheering you on when no one else does. I have no idea what Ryan is doing now. I'm not sure if Dad still sits in that old recliner, staring at the TV as if he hasn't thrown away his true legacy. I don't know if Mom still looks at my empty seat during holidays, wondering when I'll return and act as if nothing happened. To be honest, I don't care. I now have a table and a seat of my own. When I look around at my life, I don't see the things I built, friends, clients, and the serene calm of knowing I made the right decision, missing. I simply see myself at last, completely free. If I've learned anything, it's that you don't have to remain in an environment where you aren't respected. Love that should have been offered freely doesn't have to be earned by bleeding yourself dry. Sometimes, just walking away and continuing to walk is the bravest thing you will ever do. I didn't have the life I had anticipated, I have something better, a life of my own. They will never touch my future, something they will never comprehend. And that is more than sufficient.